How many of you were here for the uranium panel yesterday? So most of you know that it's my professional stick to be the rain on the parade. If you want a cheerleader to just tell you how your favorite investments are going to go straight up from here, you're in the wrong room. Now, the purpose from that is not just to be ornery or to get headlines by being different or something. Believe it or not, I actually want you to make money, not just me. And my goal is to be as honest with you as I possibly can. And sometimes that means saying some unpopular things. I think, so my thought for this reality check thing was, I'm a gold bug. I'm bullish on gold this year. That's not a very exciting headline. Yay, gold bug likes gold. However, last year, my highest conviction trade was not gold, it was uranium. So I'm not a permabull, or I'm not always a one-track mind sort of speculator or investor. So I hope you'll tuck that away. In terms of a reality check, my idea for this talk is to ask myself what could go wrong. If you don't want to hear it, this is your last chance. We have not left the taxiway yet. If you want to run before I tell you something you don't want to hear, the door's right there. There's no locks on it. If you're still here, don't blame me. Blame me if you like, but I won't listen if you don't like what I have to say. All right, so first and foremost, I got just a gazillion emails after Doomberg's recent about face about the new oil plenty that he's now predicting. Now, this is Doomberg. I think maybe he's going to need to change his name to Boomberg, because now we're going to have cheap energy forever, and it's going to be a boom. Not only is this a 50-year vision of abundant, cheap hydrocarbons, and I'm not actually picking on Doomberg or Boomberg here. I think he's saying something significant that requires thought. If we're not going to be blind bulls, and I always remind people, it's fine to be a bull, but don't forget that there's a sword behind that red cape. So if you go charging off blindly, bad things will happen. You want to be very considered about your bullishness. So Doomberg, I think, provided us a service with giving us a contra case. He's saying that, or he or they, there's a green chicken out there telling us that natural gas liquids are now being recaptured, repurposed, and becoming gas and diesel on an economic scale that wasn't significant before, and this is a game changer. I saw a headline just yesterday, I think it was Bloomberg or some mainstream financial outlet, saying the U.S. is drowning OPEC in oil. This is what Doomberg is talking about. This is a big deal. If true, this really is a game changer. It alters the energy landscape, for decades going forward. But part of Doomberg's commentary or thesis is that it's relevant right now. That part of why the United States is not in recession now is the cheap energy. And there's logic to this. It's not just, gas prices are cheaper at the pump. Yay, people are happy because gas prices are cheaper. Your gas and your diesel goes into transporting things to your Walmart supercenter and Amazon's trucks, and it goes into making everything. Energy is the fundamental flow of the universe. Everything we do takes energy. My talking takes energy, generating hot air and contributing to global warming. Up here I am. So cheaper energy is deflationary. That's not good for gold. If cheap energy makes us consume more, that could be good for commodities. But if you're looking at deflation, deflation means prices are going down, so your commodities prices would be going down. This maybe Doomberg still should be called Doomberg, but not because the world is running out of oil and we have that doom. Now the doom is for commodities prices because cheap energy is going to send all commodities prices lower. Now, I'm not an oil patch expert. I don't claim to be, a mining engineer or an oil engineer or something like that. Other people who have poked some holes in Doomberg's thesis. And apparently it's not so easy to convert all these natural gas liquids as suggested. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of technology. I'm not going to get into the fray here. What I will say, though, is that this is an example of, it's one of these big ideas. If you remember, how many of people have read this or heard one of these Doomberg comments on this? Does anybody not know who I'm talking about, the green chicken? Wow. Okay. So this guy's made a big splash. He's supposedly an oil industry insider who, for security reasons and/or marketing gimmicks, appears in YouTube videos as a green chicken instead of himself. But hugely successful. This guy's got millions of followers, and you listen to him. He sounds really knowledgeable. For all I know, he is. Other experts, however, have pushed back on Doomberg's thesis. So let's just take it for now that there's an oil industry expert who's telling us we're going into a new era of energy abundance, and not just nuclear, which I'm very bullish on, but specifically hydrocarbons. If he's right, that's something we as resource investors and speculators need to keep in mind. But my pushback is he's saying he's got like this big 50-year outlook based on this pivot. But he's also saying that this is keeping the U.S. economy up now. And I see it as one, let's stipulate that Doomberg is right. The thing about a tidal shift is that the moment the tide shifts from rising to falling is imperceptible. Nobody can see that. You only measure it sometime later, you realize, oh, holy cow, the water's not coming up anymore, it's going down. So if we've reached this tipping point, I have a hard time seeing it as something that's going to make a radical change in the global economy like right now. I see it as something that if he's right is a factor going forward we need to weigh. I think there are other factors that are probably much more important for the U.S. economy than that. And you know what? Even if gas prices are cheaper at the pump, if corporate America is cutting back because their outlook is negative, which it is, and you're fired, the fact that you're filling up your giant SUV for a few less dollars isn't really going to make you go out and spend more. So I'm skeptical that this thesis changes this thesis has not changed my speculative investments now, this year. But it is a consideration for us to go, I think, keep in mind going forward. Another thing that I've been giving some thought to, how could I be wrong? What would make my thesis wrong is, the long and variable lags thing, it doesn't just apply to financial conditions tightening in a recession. It also applies to fiscal. Like we all got all excited about the grossly misnamed Inflation Reduction Act, and all these hundreds of millions of dollars are going to be spent, how inflationary it's going to be. I bought that. That made sense to me. But there's a difference between appropriations and actual spending. Right? Just because the bill was approved a couple years ago, that doesn't mean all these hundreds of billions of dollars have been spent already. That's still, they've even reappropriated some of that money to other purposes because it hadn't been used yet. So all those hundreds of billions or trillions of dollars, it's not a thing of 2 years ago. It's something that's still happening. So if there's still, like the Fed is no longer tightening, they're cutting back on the QE has become QT, but if the money that Washington has approved is still going into the python, like the mistake here is thinking, oh, the pig is already 2 years into the python. Well, what if it wasn't what if that pig is just the snout is in the python? What if there's still a lot more pig to go through the python? Well, that money still going into the economy is something that could actually make not just team soft landing, but team no landing could be right. This isn't a promise. This isn't a prediction. I'm not saying I've joined team no landing. I'm just trying to be honest in terms of a reality check. That's a big deal. That is a lot of money. And we're starting to see headlines about more of that being spent. Happily for us as resource investors, and particularly in the uranium market, there is meaningful and material money going into the nuclear space now that wasn't there before, and that's helping us out. Another thing that could make me wrong, or to make the Doombergs of the world wrong in the broader sense of the term, is this comes from Ed Yardeni, mainstream investor, well known. You may have seen him on mainstream financial media. I didn't come up with this, so I want to give credit where it's due. He said something that really made me sit back and think. I said I was, what did I say? I was an arrogant bastard at first. I'm also antisocial. I'm well known as a stick in the mud, but yeah, I am arrogant. And I think for myself, and it takes a lot for somebody to really smack me in the face with an idea that makes me step back and go, oh, whoa, I missed this. And this is one of those. So Ed says that the baby boomers have now reached a tipping point where they've gone from saving their whole life to now spending. This is, I've got goosebumps thinking about this right now, standing here. This is huge. That is trillions and trillions of dollars. If you think the grossly misnamed IRA was a lot of money, that's nothing compared to the entire baby boom. I mean, it's a baby boom generation. It's not the little bit of babies generation. It's the freaking baby boom generation. If they flip from saving to spending, that is a multi-trillion dollar swing variable that changes everything. And you know what? I had a reception last night for readers, and one of the gentlemen said he's been saving in gold for his life, and now he maybe has only a decade or two left. So he's actually thinking not just of shifting from saving to spending, he's thinking of cashing out gold to put into other, like spending down some of his gold, because he doesn't think he's going to need it for that long. He's got more than he can imagine spending in 20 years. And that really clicked with this Ed Yardeni thing, like, holy cow, this isn't just any old baby boomer. This is a gold bug who's thinking about, well, heck, I've got, if I don't know what this gentleman's net worth is, but I'm picturing Scrooge McDuck thinking, you know what? How many swimming pools full of gold do I need, right? So wow, that was a real kind of aha moment on top of everything else here. If the boomers start spending, one more part of this, my father, he's on the higher end of I'm not sure he counts officially as a baby boomer, but he's like classic case. He's never a particularly wealthy man, scrimped and saved his entire life. We went out to a restaurant. He visited me in Puerto Rico. We went out to a restaurant, and it was pretty pricey. And he's looking at these two choices, and this one steak was a lot more than the other. And he's dithering over whether to get the one that was his favorite cut, because it was like half as much as the other one. I looked at him, I said, Dad, I don't call him that. Dad, I think you can afford it. And he just kind of sat back like, oh, yeah, well, I'll order the one I want, right? So I see this as a very real thing. I see this in my life. I see this in the broader world out there. A shift from saving to spending with trillions of dollars at stake it's hard to overstate how big an impact that has economic. But here we are back to my big ideas thing, that tidal shift. It's not like the baby boomers are all going to go out and spend all of it overnight. They're not going to dump trillions of dollars in the economy tomorrow. Even if this is happening right now, and I think it probably is, I think Ed is probably right, we're at that tidal shift point. We have anecdotal stories, but in terms of the economy suddenly just going in a different direction, that's not going to happen overnight. This is going to be a multi-year, multi-decade impact, and we'll just have to see what the rate of change is. But it's enough money that if enough of it is, if you just make that decision like my dad, like, oh yeah, I can afford it. He spent 50% more on that steak in that instant. So if enough boomers have that attitude shift and start spending significantly, I always wanted a Ferrari, right? That would impact our investment context here as resource investors. The takeaways here, and I'd like to have a bit of time for Q&A, so I'll wrap this up. The takeaways here are not, oh, I'm wrong, I'm mea culpa, I'm doing it about face. The most important takeaway is actually don't get cocky. No matter how baked in the cake or solid any investment thesis you have makes sense to you, you can be wrong. Suddenly something can come up. The Ed Yardenis of the world can slap you in the face with something you never thought of before. And I have to say, I never thought of that before, right? And it's suddenly like, what could possibly change? Well, wow, suddenly all these trillions of dollars I didn't think about. They're right there, ready to go. So don't get cocky. Consider how you might get wrong. Always bear in mind risk as well as reward. You want to balance the two. Maybe this sounds like pop psychology, but I think this is very, very important. So having scared everybody with the reality checks of things that could go wrong, my outlook is still for recession. I believe the world is not going into, but is in a global recession now. I do not think the United States is exempt. The so-called rolling recession, it doesn't show in the GDP numbers, but manufacturing, shipping, earnings. We've had recession after recession in sectors of the economy in the U.S., that banana republic to the south of the border from us here, except in the labor spending thing. And I think that's been masked by the pandemic effect. So my outlook, despite these contra Lobo variables, is still for recession. I think that's very bullish for gold. I think the world's shifting to accepting nuclear energy as green is a one-way change. And so that makes uranium a good bet despite the recession. So I like the two yellow metals for this year. But if there's a chance for me being wrong, these things I've discussed are impacts. And the good news here is that all of these things, if I'm wrong, they hurt gold, not uranium. All of these things would be great for uranium prices. But the issue with uranium is not that I'm not a bull on uranium. It's just it's gone like this. And I cannot responsibly tell any of you, go out and buy uranium now, and it's just gone like this. The history, the odds, the statistics tell us there will be a dip, buy the next dip. Don't give in to FOMO, don't chase anything at 52-week highs or multi-year highs. All right, I got a little bit of time for Q&A, and I do like, is there anybody who has a burning question that I can address? Yes, sir. Question is, will the money helicopters prevent the recession? My thesis is no, but they will mitigate it. So I think Luke Grahman and some others are saying maybe there won't be a recession because of the government response, or maybe I've got that backwards. I'm sorry, I don't want to throw Luke under the bus. But my thesis is we get a hard landing, but the instant response from the powers that be is to send out the money helicopters. So it won't last long. We're not looking at a multi-year recession. They're not going to wait for all the massive unemployment. As soon as it's obvious that it's happening, they will pivot, not just the Fed, but Washington too. They will send out all this money, and I think that's going to be very inflationary. I think it's going to be great for gold and commodities prices in general. How are we going to have a recession? We got low unemployment, election year, the Fed is expected to cut rates. Okay, so the Fed is expected to cut rates just to keep the range. Like if inflation is going down and you hold the rates high, you're actually more restrictive. So the plan is not necessarily to ease up, but to cut rates to keep an equal restrictive level. So I don't really see that as all that material. Also, the low unemployment, as I said, I think it's not real in the sense, I'm not saying that the number is actually necessarily a lie, though it might be. I'm saying that employers who are not firing people that they should because they're worried about not being able to get them back, how hard it was to hire people after the pandemic, are making a mistake. Like if you really should, on a business case, fire 10 to 20% of your workforce to keep your company solvent, and you don't because you're afraid of getting employees back, then you increase the chance of having to fire 100% of them when you go bankrupt. So I think that the unemployment rate is actually a very risky thing to rely on. The other thing too is that if you look at the history, and this is a flawless track record, the unemployment rate goes down, and then it ramps up right before the recession. For the last 50 years or more, you look at that unemployment number, it curves up right into the recession, which is recognized after the fact. That is where we are today. So I could say a lot more, but yeah, I'm cautious about that. What's the real reason for implementing AI all over the world? I'm not a conspiracy theorist on this. I think simple market forces are quite sufficient. A better mousetrap, a cheaper. I mean, all these companies that realize, let's say real estate companies that realize they don't need to hire a person to write the same repetitive blurb, split plan, ranch house, blah, blah, blah. An AI can do that. Those jobs are gone. It didn't need a conspiracy to fire those people. It was just money saver. Oh, and by the way, the robots are coming too. So this isn't just a white collar thing. I mean, BMW is now putting robots in one of their car plants. It's an interesting world we're going into. I think the AI thing is huge. I think it's going to create massive dislocations. I think it's actually going to create more wealth, though. I think human society as a whole and people will be richer in real terms because of AI. It will be a tremendously empowering, a creative force unleashing in human society. But the dislocation on the way there, the jobs that will be destroyed first, that which will be created will come later, and in between, the pain and the outcry will be huge. And I see that actually as inflationary, because anything that's no fault of the people's own, we have now established that no fault of the people's own is sufficient reason to send people a stimmy check. right? A recession is no fault of the people's own. AI is no fault of the people's own. Anything bad that happened is no fault of the people's own, so let's send them, thousands of dollars, and it'll be an interesting world. You're going to get somebody to throw eggs at me. What do I think of Donald Trump? I'm a libertarian. I'm not a Democrat. I say something about Biden, and people say, "Oh, you're a MAGA fanatic," or I say something about Trump. "Oh, you're a Biden." No. I think the important thing I can say about this, besides whining about politics, is that either one wins, it's inflationary. Like, I'm sorry, Trump fans, but Trump, he was the one with the first $1 trillion deficits before Biden got there. And okay, the pandemic, it was an emergency, but everything's an emergency. Politicians like to bribe voters. And Trump has shown us that he's quite willing to spend any kind of money and tell the Fed, lobby the Fed, threaten the Fed to lower rates, just like a Democrat. And by the way, he was a lifelong Democrat before he decided the Republicans would be stupid enough to vote for him. Sorry, I didn't say that. Point is, either way, whether it's, the evil party or the stupid party, it's gonna be inflationary. That's my takeaway. Thank you very much.